Today we are going to work on exactly the easiest way I've found to get a GarageBand demo song with some recorded audio tracks and also some MIDI or instrument tracks out of GarageBand and imported into Reaper so that you can, well, basically not be limited by, the MIDI editor and GarageBand amongst many other things. In that application. So anyway, we're going to start off by I'm going to open up a project that I already have created in GarageBand, and the first thing that we're going to do now that we have this open, you'll see that we have. Let's see, we have a bunch of guitar tracks here, bass track. This is our MIDI instrument. Has Superior Drummer on it. It's a drum track with all MIDI. This guy I'll clean up a little bit. We'll get rid of that track that we don't need. And there's actually only audio on 4 of these 5 tracks. This guitar left actually never got any guitar laid down on it. Should be actually rename that to solo left and solo right. Anyway, so the first thing that we're going to do, now that you've seen me clean up my project a little bit, we're going to do one other cleanup thing, and that is that you'll see all of this empty space off to the right of the project here. It's probably an extra minute of silence on the end that will get rendered when we freeze these tracks, which is how we're going to export them out of GarageBand. And first, we're only going to work on the audio tracks. We are not going to work on the MIDI drum track. That's going to be a separate process, which we'll do in the second half of this. So anyway, the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of this extra space on the end here, because like I said, it will render as silence, and we don't want to take up the extra space on disk with just a bunch of silence, because silence takes up just as much space on your hard drive as actual recorded audio. So we will go up in the upper right hand corner here until you see this this cursor that kind of looks like a bracket with arrows on either side. You will click and then drag this back to where we're pretty close to the end of the audio there. I think that's good enough. And so now we are pretty much ready to start freezing or exporting these guitar tracks and this bass track. So what we'll do is we'll come over and we want to first adjust the track header a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll control click or right click on the any one of the tracks, and you'll come down here to configure track header and click on that. And we want to enable the track lock option. This is what allows us to actually freeze these tracks or freeze the audio and get it out of GarageBand. So one thing I do want to note is that after we freeze these tracks or do this track lock operation, what we'll be getting that we import into Reaper will be one single audio file per track. It's basically, you're going to lose all of these edits, crossovers, anything that's done here. That should be fine. If you're at this point, you can always go back and edit it in Reaper and re-record stuff. You'll also lose your takes and things like that if you have multiple takes that you've done in GarageBand. This is basically to export your more or less, let's say, final mix and get it into Reaper in case you want to do some more drum editing. And like I said, you can do just regular editing as well. So anyway, to get on with it, what we want to do is come over here, and that track lock icon that you've now enabled on all these tracks, you're going to want to click that just for the tracks, audio tracks, mind you, that you want to export. You'll notice that I didn't do the track that has no audio on it, and I also did not do the MIDI drum track. So now that you have those clicked, you'll want to take your start cursor, bring that all the way back to the beginning, come up and hit play. And so now it is going to, in faster than real time, it's going to do exactly what it says on the screen. It is freezing all of those tracks into a particular directory. and we are going to copy those files out of that directory and into our Reaper project once we get to that point. So this should just take a few more seconds. It's about a 5 or 6 minute song, I think, and as you'll see, it gets done in probably 20 or 30 seconds at tops here. So yeah, almost finished. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the MIDI out of GarageBand. This is a bit more of a complex process just because of the way that GarageBand handles MIDI. One possible way of doing this is to actually route the MIDI out of GarageBand and then back into Reaper and then do kind of a play in GarageBand while you record in Reaper. That's one possibility. I've actually found something that's a bit easier and quicker to do, and we're going to go that route, even though it will require downloading some a small piece of software here in just a minute. So anyway, now that that's done rendering, all of your audio tracks are now rendered out to a file on disk that we can then import into Reaper. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to deal with the MIDI track, the drum track, which I use Superior Drummer for all the drums on all my demo songs. And so with the drum track, we could have gone ahead and clicked the track lock like that and exported it with the audio files. And if you want to just, if you're done drum editing, you don't want to do any more editing, you could do that and it will render the actual drum audio to a file and you can import that into Reaper. However, I have some just very basic drum tracks on here that I want to get into Reaper because I'm much better at editing MIDI in Reaper, and I have tons of macros and other stuff that I use to be able to lay things down quickly. So I actually do not want to render this drum audio. I want to get the MIDI out of this, out of GarageBand so that I can go and edit it in Reaper. So what I've done is I've highlighted the drum track here, and that causes all of these regions in the track to become highlighted and selected. That's exactly what we want. Because now what we want to do is we want to hit Command J at the same time. And that, as you'll see, will then creates one single long MIDI region that encompasses our entire project, all of the drums that we've done so far. So now the strategy is we are going to kind of export this as an Apple loop, and then that will then allow us to use a piece of third-party software to convert it into a real MIDI file that Reaper understands. So the next part of the process is, now that we've created this one single MIDI region, is we come up here to the File menu, and you want to go down to Add Region to Loop Library. That will bring up this dialog. You want to make sure its loop is selected here, and then you just want to name it. In my case, I'll just name it a drum track, and then go ahead and click Create. And now it will, again in faster than real time, create our drum loop. Now one thing you'll notice is that it is hanging a looped section off the end here. That means we're probably going to have to go into Reaper and edit that off the end. I'm thinking there might be a way to render this so that it's just a single copy of the loop rather than two copies as we see it doing right now. Haven't figured that part out yet, but there may be a way to do that. It's easy enough to just go into Reaper and edit that MIDI out, so that's the way I've been doing it so far. Anyway, now that that's done, we're going to want to do a quick check just to make sure that it did get exported. So we'll go up in the upper right here, we'll click on the loop icon. That will bring up our loop dialog here, and we look down here and we say, hey, there is our drum track. We did a little preview, it is playing, and so we know that that Apple loop got created. So at this point now, we are done with GarageBand. You don't need to save your session if you don't want to. I'm not going to. I'm just going to quit out of GarageBand and be done. So now the next part of the process is you're going to need to convert that MIDI track. We'll stick with the MIDI for now. You're going to want to convert that MIDI track, or excuse me, that Apple loop into a standard MIDI file that then Reaper can understand and import. So we're going to go over to Google here, and we're going to click download, excuse me, we're going to type download GB to MIDI.zip. As you can see, I've obviously done this before. That will bring up this list of items. You're going to want to go to Scott Troyer's blog, Export MIDI from GarageBand. You click on that. It takes you to his blog page, and in like the fourth paragraph down, you'll see the link to the application we need, GB to MIDI.zip. So you click on that, it will download it to your download directory. So then we can go and we can show that in our Finder, and we double click that zip file. That then opens, or it unzips the actual GB to MIDI application. Now you can go ahead and grab that and drag it into your applications folder if you want, just so you don't lose track of it. Or you can just run it directly from where it is. Since I've already done that and put it in my applications folder, I'm just going to go ahead and run the one we just downloaded from here. It'll give you this little warning telling you you're opening something from the internet. That's fine. And then it opens up the actual application. So here's the GB to MIDI application. It's very simple. All you do is you click Run, and it'll open up asking you where you want to, or where the MIDI file is, or the Apple loop file, GarageBand Apple loop file that you want to convert to a MIDI track. Now, as you can see, it's gone directly to the track we just created because I've used this application before, and it remembered the directory that I was in. So let me show you exactly where you want to look for that Apple loop you just created and saved. You're going to want to go to your user directory. In my case, my username is TPERS. You go to your user directory and you'll click on Library, Audio, Apple Loops, User Loops, Single Files, and there is our track. So you'll click on your GarageBand Apple loop, you'll say Choose, and it almost instantaneously converts it into this MIDI file. So now we're going to just want to slide this window out of the way. And you're going to want to keep that right there for now. You're going to want to open up another window because we're going to need to go and find those, those audio files that we exported. So actually what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open up a window, and you're going to want to find the GarageBand project file from the project you exported the audio from. So in our case, it was this GarageBand file right here. You're going to want to right-click. I use 2 fingers on the trackpad for this to get the context menu open, and you're going to want to show package contents. So at this point, it should come up like this, and you'll go into the media directory, and then you'll look. There'll be a freeze files directory. You'll open that, and there are our 4 files. Okay, so now we've got in one folder we've got our 4 audio files here. In the other folder we've got our MIDI files here. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open up Reaper, and we're going to want to create a new project that we're going to import all this stuff into. So the first thing you're going to want to do, you can say new project. It came up in a new project, but whatever. We've made this new project. The first thing, we're going to want to save it. We're going to want to save it because we need a folder to put our stuff in. So I'm just going to call it test. And the way I have this set up, it creates a subdirectory for the project. If you don't have this selected, you're going to want to create a new folder so it doesn't just dump everything. How you do your folder management is up to you. This is how I do mine. So then I click Save. Now our Reaper project should have been created. it should be in that test directory. So I will go and I'll look, and I will see, yes, it created a test directory, and there we are. So now we found our Reaper project that was just created in the directory we chose. And so now we're going to want to take this MIDI and audio, and we're going to want to dump it into that directory. So you're going to come over here to your audio files that you have in the one Finder window. You're going to want to select them all, and something is playing back. All right, got a little ahead of itself. So yeah, you're going to want to drag and drop these into your project folder. And then you're going to want to come over to just the MIDI file. You don't need the AIF, that's the Apple loop. You want to grab the .mid file and do the same thing. Drop it in your test project folder. Now you can go ahead and close out these other two folders. You just want to have your test project folder open. You want to open back up the Reaper session, but make sure your folder is on top. That's going to make things a bit easier. And now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to highlight all of those files, the MIDI file and the 4 audio files. And you're going to want to drag them into the Reaper left-hand track section. Now what that will do is that will cause a dialog to come up that says separate tracks or single track. And you're going to want to do separate tracks for everything. And it's going to go ahead and import everything that you just created, including up here your MIDI track for your drums. So there's one thing that we have to do. Well, now, in order for all of this stuff to play out correctly, you need to know the tempo of the session from GarageBand. So I happen to know that the tempo of this project, it didn't have an elaborate tempo map. It was a single tempo throughout the whole song, which makes things a lot simpler. I plan on doing another video where we export the tempo map, but for now, and that may just be a manual process if nothing else. But for now, since we have a single tempo for the whole song, we're in luck because we can deal with that very simply. By default, Reaper creates a tempo of 120, and our tempo for this song is 215. However, because of the way Reaper defaults, all of these audio tracks are basically tick-based, if you want to call them that. So when you change the tempo, it's going to stretch the audio, and we don't want that. We want the MIDI to get to be 215, but the audio is already recorded at 215, so we want to make sure that doesn't change when we change the tempo. So you'll come over here and you'll select one of the track headers, and then you can shift-click to select the rest of them. You don't want to select the MIDI track, just the 4 audio tracks. And then you get your context menu up by right-clicking, 2-finger clicking, whatever you do. And you'll come down here to track time base, and you'll select the time. And you want the time option, because you want all of your audio tracks to be time-based, unless you plan on having tempo changes stretch the audio. So we don't want that right now. We want to get our project lined up correctly. So now that we have all of our audio tracks as a time-based track, we can come up to the tempo editor here, and we can go ahead and type in our correct tempo for the song, which is 215 beats per minute. Now, all of the MIDI and audio and everything lines up perfectly. So now the only thing I have left to do is add in my drum instrument, so that when I play back this MIDI track, you'll actually hear something. So we'll go ahead and we'll open up, and I already know where all my stuff is. I use Superior Drummer. It's a VSTi. I'm going to choose it right here, load it up, load up my Metal Foundry drum kit. We have audio, so dial that back down. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, because I know that first off, I want to find my bass track. So let me go ahead and solo a track. Okay, there's my bass track. So I know that I don't need to deal with the panning on this track, and I know I need this. This is a solo track below it, so I know I don't need to. It's got no audio anywhere except the middle. So now these are my 2 guitar tracks. So I'm going to pan these hard left, right, like I normally would in my session, and then I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and bring down the volume, because here's the other tip. when you export all this stuff out of GarageBand, it is super loud, all of it. So you're going to want to bring down your volume on all this stuff, or it's going to clip like crazy. In fact, I'm not even going to play it before bringing it down. Oops, that's Pam. There we go. Grab the volume, bring that down. All right. Now things are a bit more sane, so when I play back, it won't be just blaring. And there you go. So I just did some levels there, but for the most part, you get the idea. You know, I was able to successfully export all of my audio and my MIDI from GarageBand. Now I have it in Reaper. I can go ahead and open up my MIDI editor, and I can start editing my MIDI in Reaper, which is really the whole reason that I wanted to go through this exercise to begin with. So the other kind of challenge, as I kind of mentioned a little while ago, would be if you have a song with a lot of tempo changes, and how do you get the tempo map from one to the other? That's going to be my next goal, is to figure that out, and I will make another video guiding the rest of you on how I made that happen. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this video, stay tuned. I'm going to try to make some more that will be helpful for all of us in doing this kind of stuff. All right? See ya.